Specter Knight, the Knight of Specters, I guess. I don't really know. Specter Knight is a major character from the game Shovel Knight. He's a member of the Order of No Quarter, the main villainous group of the game, who serve as the main villain of the game, the Enchantress's Order of Knights. Being that Specter Knight is one of the 3 enemy knight characters to have a unique DLC dedicated to telling his story, I have to do a lot less theory crafting and presumption than I might have to do if I were covering other enemy knights, like the Polar. Though the base game of Shovel Knight, now named Shovel of Hope in light of the newer DLCs, has some emotional stories sprinkled throughout, Specter Knight's backstory is not really touched on in that particular adventure. Anyway, to get to the meat and bones of who he is, mostly the bones, because Halloween, I'll mostly be paying attention to how he was portrayed in the Specter of Torment DLC, wherein he embarks on his own unique adventure. In that DLC, Specter Knight is shown to even have what I'd call a tragic backstory. I mean, when you look like that, there are probably some unresolved issues that you have back in the corporeal world. It's probably not all fine and dandy up there in that helmet of his. Or is that a helmet? Yeah, I'm 90% sure it's a helmet. I'm just kind of making up nonsense to transition into the costume analysis section. And hey, that's my good excuse to look further into whatever's going on within those pixels there. But to do that in a way that I feel is best, I'll first set the stage with the disclaimer. This video will be structured mainly around character analysis by way of a large focus on visual design, with some game story analysis complementing and backing it up, in order to get a quick general idea of who Specter Knight is as a character without spoiling the whole story. It's not going to be a comprehensive breakdown of Specter Knight's DLC. Now, it might get a bit dicey trying to justify a few of my points while not directly explaining certain key story elements, but I'll try to reference those more vaguely in a way that should hopefully be recognizable to people who know Specter of Torment's story, without spoiling it for those who don't. Nevertheless, I will still be spoiling some story elements of Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, and mainly Specter of Torment. So just be aware of that. By doing it all in this way, I hope to get across a clearer idea of what I think the designers of Specter Knight were going for with his design and overall character, while not simply just describing the game's events verbatim. So to procrastinate on the topic of the helmet for a bit here, let's first look at what I think is the most obvious part of his attire. Specter Knight is cloaked in, well, a cloak. I think people would also use a cloak on a character to imply villainy too, like a stereotypical vampire or something. Both of these apply to Specter Knight, as we'll get into. Not the vampire part, the secrecy and the villainy part. Also, I won't fully spoil why, but I do want to mention that there is nuance to his villainy. To those who know his story, I want you to know I don't mean to give off the impression that he's simply one note through and through. I just want to avoid going into specifics because it's a little too spoilery for what I'm trying to do with this video. But I think an acknowledgement is in order. So there you go. With regards to the cloak, I think it's worth mentioning that it's a crimson cloak. Instead of a basic black or dark gray, the designers went with crimson. If I were to speculate, I'd say this deep crimson color was likely intended to communicate a melancholic type of passion within Specter Knight. Kind of an inner turmoil, as a hint to his characterization within his DLC's story. As you might notice, it's not a bright red, which could often be used to signal power or aggression. Both of those ideas are more of an acute, less nuanced feeling than what I think Specter Knight's design is trying to hint at. He bears a darker, more toned-down version of red, which I think maps well onto how Specter Knight is portrayed in the game. He's not a mad berserker, no, his anger is more toned down and controlled when he's shown to the outside world. You can maybe sense a melancholic feeling to the whole color communication here, like there used to be a fieriness that's been worn away to some extent over time. And I'd say it certainly has, as there are moments where Specter Knight just kinda doesn't fight the situation he finds himself in. Once again though, this is nuanced, and I wouldn't consider him totally spineless. I also wouldn't call him by any stretch of the imagination a fight-to-the-end firebrand. I'd say he's more somber and pragmatic. He fights back, but not always as a rule. It seems to be mostly where he can. Or where he feels like he can get away with it, I guess. And it's almost as if that bright red that could have been there before has been tarnished and became more muddy and dark-colored as his passion waned. Now, I don't mean to say that his outfit actually changed from bright red to crimson, but maybe it could be something you might assume given the initial lack of context in his backstory we're presented with in Specter of Torment's earlier sections. In fact, on the contrary, we know from Specter of Torment that Specter Knight's cloak actually used to be blue. The actual color change that happened was associated with a major character event wherein Specter Knight was physically altered and his mission somewhat changed. The fact that red and blue are often used as opposite colors in all kinds of universal applications, for example video game teams or a signal of temperature, makes me think that it was really intended to accentuate a deep alteration to Specter Knight's character. Whether my assumptions are correct here or not, I still get the sense that color is a big vector by which Yacht Club Games communicates ideas. I think the drab, darker color scheme of Specter of Torment's world, when compared to Shovel Knight's equivalent of the same or similar locations, communicate, well, torment. Shovel Knight is a lot more of a standard, optimistic, plucky hero type, while Specter Knight has a darkness to him. And I think it shows when comparing their respective aforementioned campaigns' color schemes. The way that even all 4 campaigns' color schemes map, I'd say fittingly onto their respective knights, makes me think that Yacht Club Games really intended to communicate through color. Anyway, lastly we have his armor. A gold-colored metallic covering, which is what I'd pretty much call the bright part of his design. Though it is bright, I think the big thing it achieves is contrasting the darkness. It's almost so dazzling when compared to the dark parts that I think it works well as an allegory for Specter Knight's whole obtuseness, as I think it visually distracts from the dark parts of his outfit, just like how Specter Knight in his DLC puts up an emotional veneer or wall which houses his vulnerable side. But there's another aspect to it too. Even though I'm describing this version as shiny, his initial armor color during that blue cloak era of his life is shown as more of a rich and saturated gold color. I imagine, similar to the red from blue color change, this is color communication working to parallel the change in character. The armor being more desaturated now, I'd say, is another good way to communicate that Specter Knight's drive has been dampened with that aforementioned character change. Though I do want to cover my bases here, as the sheen of the gold might also be a vanity thing that speaks more to the Enchantress's intentions with how she wants the world to see her Order of Knights, sort of imposing and above others with their set of regal outfits. Possibly. And speaking of regal, we can start off getting a quick idea of the aforementioned Specter Knight obtuseness by taking a look at how he interacts with King Knight in Specter of Torment. King Knight calls him a loyal lapdog, and without missing a beat, Specter Knight cuts right through to King Knight's Achilles heel. King Knight's fixation on proving his own nobility to the outside world. Suffice to say, Specter Knight does not even take the bait slightly. At the beginning of Specter of Torment, we can also see Black Knight try to dig at Specter Knight a little bit just by bringing up his past, but Specter Knight brick walls him anyway. It doesn't phase him. Even though he's a ghost, he phases through walls. This is what I mean, cutting and unfazable. I'm losing my mind. Specter Knight does what he can to appear unfazed when others try to break through, but his softer side is displayed in-game. For instance, in moments when he's alone, he's often shown staring into a locket in a sepia tone color scheme. Once again, there's that color communication. I assume Yacht Club Games picked the sepia tone to imply a lamentation of the past, just as the trope of sepia tone often is used to imply. Take photo filters or the way that, they change the colors in TV shows or movies, during like reminiscent moments or past moments or looking back on fond memories and photos with the photo filters. Yeah, Specter Knight, he's just a softie, right? I mean, he wouldn't hurt anybody, right? I mean, probably not. No, I mean, actually, he's literally hurting people in lots of sections of Shovel of Hope. I don't know where to go with this train of thought. I'm just trying to awkwardly transition into the next, the end. But yeah, I mean, I think we're just about done here with my intended scope of this video. Without explaining major spoilers, which again, I don't think is necessary for the way I tried to structure this video, I feel like I've said what's necessary. So in conclusion, I think Yacht Club Games did a great job with color communication throughout the DLC. But really, if I'm going outside of the range of this particular video, I think most of Shovel of Hope is also great in the visual communication department. And audio, as I alluded to with the music. Specter Knight himself wears tragedy, I'd say. He's ragged and appears drained of saturation. I mean, just look at his cloak, it's got holes in it. Furthermore, the darkened levels you run through in this game also might reference how Specter Knight is seeing the world in comparison to how Shovel Knight sees the same world. Specter Knight's tragic and desperate situation could be considered as reflected in the world's color scheme and level music. Also, a lot of people in the hub section of the game they always want like a coin or two for something. It's like very transactional. It's a harsh world for Specter Knight. And if you really want to expand that further, you could also consider the difficulty of the game as a parallel to Specter Knight's struggle. Though the difficulty is obviously subjective, and I'd consider the other character campaigns to be kinda similar in their difficulty. I'm forgetting how to speak as this video goes on. But hey, I'd like to know from the real-life Specter's Knight's Lich Yard, the comments section. The Lich Yard is his level. Come on, have some spirit. You're not gonna ghost me, right? There's a phantom of a chance. I don't know. I think Shovel Knight Treasure Trove limits the details in the way it portrays stories that I could see many different interpretations. Also, if you didn't like the video and want to tell me that my channel should become a Specter as well, then, yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. There's a subscribe button probably somewhere if YouTube hasn't for some reason removed that. You never know at this point. Look, I'm not gonna say to click it. I'm not gonna say not to click it as well. Okay, anyway, goodbye. Happy Halloween.